The Chief Secretary, Orville London, as well as the Secretary for Finance and Enterprise Development, Joel Jack, were present at this week's Post-Executive Council media briefing. Here's a summary of what they said.
As we might all be aware listening to the budget, that the budget was premised on the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan for Tobago 2.0, redoubling the effort. And we are proud as we outline our socio-economic agenda going forward that we can lift substantially the living standards of all Tobagonians and make a greater contribution to the national economy. Some key areas of focus from the budget that I would just like to highlight. Again, the budget this year is $4.95 billion. Recurrent expenditure amounted for 2.97, with development program funding at $1.98 billion. And the areas of emphasis: human capital development, agriculture and agro-processing, revitalizing the tourism sector, which is very important, economic expansion and diversification, health and wellness, and security. What we have realized over the last year is that, notwithstanding the progress that was made by the Assembly, Tobago, we still have a long way to go in terms of transformation of the Tobago economy and our attempts to diversify the economy of Tobago. I think, given our development agenda and our promise in our manifesto in the last elections, I think the budget was rightly titled Responding to the People's Mandate. Really, the budget outlined our social compact with the people of Tobago, and the budget statement highlighted the views of not just the CDP and our manifesto, but the budget came out of a wide range of and a series of consultations with the Chamber, with the Tourism Association, with the Agricultural Society, with the Credit Union League of Tobago, and importantly, the young people of Tobago. And I want to place on record and congratulate the over 40 or so young persons that attended that consultation. A lot of what informed the budget came out of the consultations, and the young people should be congratulated with the level of interaction and the cogent input that we have today that form the budget presentation. Just to highlight some key areas in terms of the human capital development, one thing coming out of that is the Assembly's continuation to invest in our young people, to invest in human capital development, and also the creation of a university for Tobago to give opportunities and training and education opportunities to not only our young people but to all Tobagonians, and to give greater access to tertiary level education. Additionally, there's a focus on improving early childhood, primary, secondary, and post-secondary education. In the tourism sector, the allocation under the development program for the tourism division, specifically for marketing, is $200 million. Following consultation with the tourism stakeholders, they indicated early that we need to rebrand Tobago, and a significant marketing push is required to rebrand the island. Correspondingly, there'll be a push to improve the Tobago tourism product as we know it under the rubric of clean, green, safe, and serene. And the budget outlines a series of programs and plans to brand Tobago, to revisit the marketing plan for the island. The budget also facilitated the need to expand room stock and also the upgrading and compliance of the sector. The budget also highlighted the Assembly's continuous plans to diversify the economy of Tobago and COVE is also important in that regard. And throughout the year, we'll be meeting with the relevant line ministers as we seek to have COVE a tax-free area with the necessary incentives to attract businesses to the COVE Eco-Industrial Business Park. What is also instrumental in this year's budget, as all of Tobago and all of the nation might be aware, we are mandated by the Tobago House of Assembly Act, Section 41, to present our budget estimates on June 30th of every year. And that will inform the budget statement in September. What usually happens is a team will meet with the Minister of Finance sometime around early September before the budget presentation to deal with the Tobago allocation. However, this year in the month of July, a meeting will be convened with the Minister of Finance, the Chief Secretary and myself as we present the case for Tobago's funding. The budget of $4.95 billion is clearly justified and outlined because most of the bulk of the budget comprises the recurrent expenditure. But what Tobago really needs now at this time to drive the island further is development funding. And I believe that in the coming month of July and later in this year, we will achieve a win-win situation where all of Tobago will benefit and the nation will benefit, because an investment in the island at this time, especially with respect to our development program funding, will be done to a greater contribution of Tobago's GDP to the national economy.
Let me take the opportunity to commend publicly Mr. Jack on what I consider to be a sterling performance in his maiden contribution in the House, delivering the Tobago budget estimates. I think I actually saw him, grow significantly in stature and in confidence over the last 48 hours. I took a deliberate decision not to get involved in any discussion, any meaningful discussion on the budget, because I wanted Tobago and the rest of the country to understand that Mr. Jack had the wherewithal to own this budgetary exercise, and I think that he did remarkably well. I was impressed with his presentation, but I was even more impressed with the way in which he handled the media, because I think that is where the real challenge comes, when you no longer read, but you have to respond to some very incisive questions and comments from the various arms of the media. And I want to take the opportunity again to wish Mr. Jack well going forward, and to say to him and to the rest of the Tobago that we are very comfortable with our choice as Secretary of Finance and Enterprise Development, and I am convinced that he can only get better. I think he's pleasantly surprised a lot of people, and I think that he is going to carry on the tradition, and we will continue having good, excellent Secretaries of Finance. Of course, much more is going to be said about the budget. I just want to remind all of us that whether he spoke for 3 hours or 30 hours, basically all a Secretary of Finance does is to present a snapshot of the situation, the plans, the programs, the vision, the deliverables, and so on, for the entire Assembly. And Mr. Jack is going to have 14 other colleagues who are going to be presenting their particular vision and their plans in the budget debate. So that contrary to, the premise of many of his critics, we have got to understand that no minister, no Secretary of Finance can in fact say everything in a budget statement. And I think Mr. Jack's comments or Mr. Jack's statement was quite comprehensive, and I think treated with most of the major issues which are of interest and importance to us in Tobago at this time. We will continue with that debate, but I just want to say two things without in any way preempting myself when I make my statement tomorrow. I want to reiterate our commitment to having a process that gives us a predictable flow of income over the ensuing year and also allows us to plan. That is why, as Mr. Jack mentioned, we have requested a meeting with the minister, and he has graciously accepted that instead of having a meeting a week or so before the national budget is read, which really does not give any time for the minister to give any serious consideration to Tobago's case, and therefore, as I said previously, you end up with an arithmetic exercise where you simply try to get the figures to match the 4.03%, which is a legal obligation. We are saying that we should have more of a planning process where we can sit down with the minister and reason with him and attempt to convince him of the seriousness of the intent of the Tobago House of Assembly, the strength of its arguments, and therefore be in a position to be able to justify our request and to move it out of the realm of what people consider to be a wish list into being really a planning document, and that is exactly what we expect it to be. So that meeting, once the minister lives up to his word, should take place next month, and we will go very well prepared to make our case, especially in the development area, where, as Mr. Jack mentioned, most of the challenge lies. While we're on the subject of meetings, as you're aware, I met with the Prime Minister last week, and I did speak to the national press, but I think I have a responsibility to speak in a little bit more detail to the Tobago press about exactly what transpired at that meeting. That meeting was the second in what I call the quarterly non-crisis meetings between the Prime Minister and the Chief Secretary. And I want to indicate that I was very appreciative that the Prime Minister did accept the need for us to have these quarterly non-crisis meetings. A number of very important issues were discussed, and we did not really conclude too many of them, but I think more progress was made, and I got more insights into the thinking of the central government this time than on the previous occasion. The first issue was the issue of internal self-government. And I must say at this point in time, despite the fact, as I said, that the meeting was conducted in a very cordial environment, I am somewhat troubled by the seeming posture of the central government with respect to the issue of internal self-government for Tobago. We are all aware that the issue of internal self-government for Tobago was maybe the most important issue in the run-up to the Tobago House of Assembly election, which was held less than 5 months ago. During those elections, both parties, both the PNM and the TOP, and by extension their partners in the People's Partnership, indicated to Tobagonians that they were firmly committed to the idea of internal self-government for Tobago. In fact, someone lookers might even say there was competition between the two teams as to which one of them could be more generous to Tobagonians. But those commitments were made, and those commitments actually climaxed with the presentation of bills to the people of Tobago. One bill, the People's Partnership Bill, actually went to the House. I am therefore going into this meeting with the Prime Minister with the assumption, and I think a justifiable assumption, that both of us are on the same wavelength, at least to the point where we're saying that we want internal self-government for Tobago, and we want it as urgently as possible. I was therefore somewhat concerned when both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Housing who accompanied her seemed to be intent on a course of action which will see the Tobago House of Assembly bill subsumed, the process for the Tobago House of internal self-government for Tobago subsumed in the discussions for the constitutional reform, the national constitutional reform exercise. I want to make it very clear that I have absolutely no problem. In fact, I am very supportive, highly supportive of any process that is leading to a review of our national constitution. But I think all of us, if we are to be, quite frank, would recognize that that is an unpredictable process, fraught with all kinds of possibilities. Of course, there's so many issues that are polarizing that I do not have any idea, and I don't think anybody in the country has any idea as to when that process is going to be satisfactorily concluded. In that context, it meant that we in the Tobago House of Assembly could not afford, after we've reached this far, after we've gone this long, after we've reached this far, to allow our process, which is so close to completion, to allow our process to be subsumed in this particular exercise. And I did indicate that to the Prime Minister. But I did not go to the Prime Minister empty-handed, just saying what I did not want. I did provide some idea of a way forward, which I think has some chance of success, using the Dispute Resolution Commission formula. As you might know, in the Tobago House of Assembly Act, there is in fact a formula to resolve disputes between the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government. Unfortunately, the Commission's powers only extend to disputes over finances. But the formula, I think, is one that can be utilized. So my recommendation to the central government, and I'm going to send it to them more formally within the next couple of days. My recommendation to them is that the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government will each select 3 or 4 persons to a commission. We call it a reconciliation committee to reconcile all the differences. And then together we'll agree on a chairman. You will put before that committee the bill which represents the views of the people of Tobago and the bill which represents the views of the People's Partnership Government. And that committee would look at these bills along with all the other documentation and hopefully be able to come up with a document which represents that reconciliation. That document will then be taken to the Cabinet, to the Executive Council, to the people, and then, of course, a bill could then go to Parliament, a bill which can then be debated in a less contentious, less volatile, less polarizing environment than we have now. I don't get the impression, and I hope I'm wrong, that the Prime Minister and the Minister are particularly enthused about that, but I think that it is the best chance that we have to resolve an issue without anybody losing too much face. And I have a promise, and I intend to carry out that promise, to send a formal letter to her, laying out in greater detail how I think the process should work. We also discussed the question of boards and the Tobago House of Assembly's non-representation on boards, which I believe have the kind of scope which extends into areas under the ambit of the Tobago House of Assembly. And we discussed that, and I indicated to her that what I will do is to provide her with a list of all the boards on which I think the Tobago House of Assembly would like to have representation. Bearing in mind that we don't want representation on all the boards. We don't even want representation on most of the national boards and committees. We only want representation on those boards, as I indicated to the Prime Minister, whose scope parallels that of the Tobago House of Assembly, and where the input of the Tobago House of Assembly is important in them making the right decisions. So that information would in fact be sent to her. And of course, the question of national security came up. As I indicated earlier, I am not comfortable with what is being done or maybe not done in Tobago. And I made the point, which I think is accepted, was accepted, that you cannot have Tobago security being part of a national program without taking into consideration the peculiar and unique circumstances in Tobago. And I am hoping that the Minister of National Security will keep his commitment to meet with the Tobago House of Assembly as a matter of urgency, because I think that some of the issues have to be discussed, and relevant, appropriate action taken as a matter of urgency, because we cannot afford for Tobago's reputation as a safe and serene island for that to be tarnished in any way. Where housing was concerned, I am hopeful because Minister Munilal, who is also the Minister of Housing, confirmed that he and the Minister of Finance were in discussion and that they are looking at ways and means by which the financing of Tobago's housing trust, that financing could be formalized. We have been hamstrung over the last decade because we have not been able to source the type of funding available at the national level for housing in Trinidad. We're not allowed to have loans. We're not allowed to raise bonds. We don't get any percentage of the grants. We don't have any access to any off-budget funding. And of course, we are, again, constrained even in having the kind of arrangements with private financiers that will allow them to do the construction. And then, of course, the Tobago House of Assembly acts as an agent for the people of Tobago in having the houses sold. So I am hoping that that meeting takes place within the next couple weeks, and that we're able to get something coming out of that, and that it would be shown when the budget is read, or even before the budget is read, that the government is prepared to make this commitment with respect to this very, very important area. Just today in the Tobago, at the Executive Council, we were able to have the Secretary of Settlement. We have approved a document laying out the plans for the housing trust in Tobago over the next 4 years. But obviously critical to that is the availability of funding. And the final area, which I want to just comment on briefly, is the question of the Prime Minister indicating that 1 dozen interceptors would be refurbished and 3 new ones purchased. But I think all of us are aware that that is not going to treat with the challenges facing us in Tobago, except they are specially assigned and more suitable vessels actually assigned to Tobago. Because what we have in Tobago is not just bays, we have inlets, we have all little places that smugglers can in fact ply their trade. And except we really have an aggressive policy towards Tobago and we implement that policy, we are going to have significant challenges. So as I indicated, a document is going to go forward to the Prime Minister by early next week, laying out our position with respect to internal self-government, our position with respect to the boards, a list of the boards, and of course our observation with respect to national security. And just 2 other things. Today, as you know, is International Day Against Drug Abuse, and the Secretary of Health and Social Services has asked me to remind us in Tobago that they are at Plymouth today, and the community outreach program starts in Plymouth and will continue throughout communities in Tobago over the next couple of weeks. The rehab center, which is something to which Tobagonians have been looking, or for which Tobagonians have been looking for the last few years, again, she has indicated to me that that rehab center should be ready for occupation in July. It is at the old mental health building at the site of the old Scarborough General Hospital. The construction is about 95% complete, and the outfitting should take about 3 or 4 weeks, so that by the end of July, we should have a functional rehab center in Tobago, and we should be able to treat with some of those persons who either have to go to Trinidad or in some cases have to stay on the streets or live in subhuman conditions.
Basically, Dr. Baker, Minister of Tobago Development, he had said before in the House following the budget presentation that he had written to you before requesting a meeting to speak on the budget, and he got no word from you. Did you receive, in fact, a letter from Dr. Baker? Did you get any word, any correspondence?
Yes, I did receive a letter from Dr. Baker some weeks ago. And I had indicated to Dr. Baker in a previous discussion that there are certain issues that I prefer to discuss first with the line ministers before I discuss with him, because I wanted to make it very clear that my position is still that the Tobago House of Assembly, the Chief Secretary and the Secretary have a responsibility to speak directly to the various ministers and not through any other minister. So that now that I have spoken to the Prime Minister with respect to the internal self-government, and now that I've spoken to the Minister of Finance with respect to I think one of the issues had to do with the back pay, I can then speak to Dr. Baker and tell him what the results of those discussions were and how we can take it going forward. But I am not getting involved in a situation where I have an issue to raise with a minister and I raise that issue through the Minister of Tobago Development. If it is matters having to do with the 6th or 7th schedule, I will do so. Matters having to do with the 5th schedule, I insist that those matters should be dealt with directly between the Tobago House of Assembly and the particular line minister, and I stick to that.
Thank you for tuning in to another Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council media briefing for the week ending June 29th, 2013.